be and create a landscape that will not only thrive now, but will thrive in this predicted climate that that they're saying it's going to be in 2 generations. So we've been doing a lot of considering about that. And as we've been making decisions in what we're doing at the Arboretum, this climate change has been factoring in. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've noticed here as it relates to the environment and the climate on campus, just with the tree change, and then some of the decisions that we've been making, and then just very briefly kind of plants or how to think about what you can choose in your own landscapes that would be climate resilient. So we want to model here at the Arboretum, we want to model climate resilient landscapes. So we are working on, as we redesign our damaged spaces, we're working on creating these models that you all and people from the surrounding community and other gardens and gardeners can come in and visit and see what basically a landscape of the future would look like, one that would tolerate these predicted conditions. And also we want to highlight, the fact that these plants that we're planting are also the answer or part of the answer to dealing with some of the effects of climate change. And I think a lot of people think about climate change as something that is happening somewhere else. It's sea level rise that we don't have to worry about. It is glacier melting somewhere else. And we have this opportunity here on this campus, at least, to show real world implications of climate change, because this tornado, the flooding that was in the region, is a direct result of climate change. So we've been thinking a lot about it, and this is just to talk a little bit about that and hopefully answer your questions, and then tell you about a research project that I'm working on that if you would like to participate in, I'd be happy to have you participate in it. So let me get started here, I think. So just a brief video just about the Arboretum for those of you who may not know or haven't been here. This was made pre-tornado, so some of the gardens look a little different now, but the intent of the Arboretum and the purpose of the Arboretum is the same. So just that. There's just music. So that's just a little bit about the Arboretum and its history in case you weren't familiar. And then of course, this happened on September 1st. And so what you can see here is some of the damage sustained by the campus. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with what happened. And I should have mentioned that these would be, there are pictures in here from the storm, and they could cause some anxiety or sadness by looking at them again, bring back some feelings that are uncomfortable. And I know coming on the year anniversary of this, there's a lot going on. And so I am familiar with feeling anxious again about thinking about all of this and everything that happened. But this program is to kind of highlight some of the lessons we've learned and some of the opportunities we have to teach, I think, about this, and saying that we have this real world example of the impact of climate change. This tornado happened here, and the severity of the storm happened here because of the shifting patterns of weather due to our warmer and wetter climate that is happening as a direct result of, of the climate change. And so we are looking at this as an opportunity. So you can see the size of the trees that we lost and the extent of the damage here on the campus. We lost 510 trees. Just in the cultivated areas. That does not include the woodlands or the perimeter, any of the perimeter woods. So this is just the center of campus within Loop Road that is more highly intensively managed than other spots on the campus. So we lost large trees. Like I said, most of the trees that we lost were our large trees. Our smaller trees made it through relatively okay, but we lost the majority of our large trees on campus. So you can get an idea of just how many trees we lost and where. These are ones that don't exist anymore on the campus. And so significant loss, right, of a lot of ecosystem services. We all know that trees provide so much for us. And so what we've been doing over this year has really been a lot of observing the changes on campus. We are also a biological field station, so the entire campus is a research site, and the field station has been documenting changes in wildlife and how different trees are recovering. We're looking at and watching and observing stress responses to the trees that are left, that's happening in the trees that are left. So it's been really interesting. And so we're still in the process of collecting all of the opportunities we have, what we can teach about. And so, this is just the pile of chips from our trees. Doesn't include the FEMA work that was being done around the township. And so, all of this results in, large trees are part of the solution to climate change. They help mitigate flooding by absorbing water. They help sink carbon, they capture carbon and collect it. And so they help put fresh air, clean air out into the environment. And so without these things, we're doing one less thing to combat climate change. There's a lot of other things we need to do to combat climate change, thinking about what fuels we use and our carbon footprints and how much we drive, all of that stuff. We need to take our food is one of the biggest ones, where it comes from and what we eat, so there's a lot, but trees and thinking about our landscape is definitely one way that we can be smarter and help out with the problem. Just to give you an idea, some of the size of the trees that we lost here. So as we have been experiencing this new campus in this new way, we've noticed a lot of things. Of course, it's a lot sunnier here. We had lost almost all of our shade here on the campus. But one thing that became very clear in the fall as it started raining, and we were getting a lot of rain, is the standing water on campus that never used to be there. So here you see a puddle. And where this puddle is, there used to be a big sugar maple, an oak, and a dawn redwood, a dawn redwood. Oh no, I'm sorry, a bald cypress there. And between those three trees, we never saw water standing like this on our campus. And this is evident everywhere we go on campus now. After a rain, we have these standing water. So an oak tree over the course of a season can take up about 1,000 gallons of water. And so that's a lot of rainstorms and a lot of water that it takes up. So you times that by, we lost a lot of oaks, but all of our trees, 500 trees, that's a lot of water that was being absorbed by the trees. So 90% of the water a tree takes up is lost through its leaves. So that creates that vacuum system pump that keeps the roots moving water up, water moving through, and continuing the process of photosynthesis and making sugars and all of that. And without these trees, this water is just sitting here. So this is a video just to kind of show what we're dealing with on rainy days. And some of you who have lost trees may have noticed this in your own yards or municipal areas as well. As just this, all the standing water just never used to sit here before. Apologies for anybody who gets motion sickness. I'm not very good at these videos. So all of this water just never sat before during any size storm. I think you all get the idea of that, but so the point is, right, so this is bad for us because we have standing water right now, but the point is we have this opportunity right now to show the value of trees, how much work they actually do. They kind of look like they're just sitting there, and maybe we enjoy the shade of them or their beauty. Maybe we enjoy the fruits from them, but they're doing so much more than I think what a lot of people understand. And so we have this opportunity to acknowledge that, but also in response to the storm and the damage that happened from the big trees, a lot of people are hesitant to plant big trees around their properties anymore. And that is one of the most concerning decisions for me that I've been hearing from people because of all the work that these large trees do. Small trees aren't going to do this work. They're pretty. They might feel less dangerous next to your house, but they don't provide the services and the ecosystem services that large trees do. And so protecting our remaining large trees and then planting new large trees for the future is so essential for dealing with climate change and the weather patterns that are happening, and helping to curb the flooding, or at least not contribute more to the flooding that's happening in this region as a result of climate change and development. So I want you to think about that as you're considering what plants to plant. These big trees do a lot of work. We don't have any idea how much water they're keeping out of our streams, or how much worse our flooding would be without all of these trees in there. Although we have a better idea now in this immediate area because we lost so many. In the Arboretum, we have a couple of stormwater management gardens. And so what they do is they capture water from the various areas of campus and funnel them down basically into a big rain garden that's planted with native plants designed to hold water for a little bit of time, but not a pond. A rain garden is designed to fill up and then slowly drain down. The water filters down through the soil, cleaning it, slowing it down, keeping it out of storm drains, which people sometimes call sewers, which is incorrect. The storm drains get piped right into waterways and push pollutants and fast moving water and a lot of water in a short amount of time into our creeks that weren't designed or evolved naturally to have that sort of hydrology happening. And then those particulates build up in our waterways, where when we do something like this, it filters down, cleans it, recharges groundwater, slows it down, and keeps it out of the storm drains. But the point of this is that, and I've worked here for 5 years, and I've never seen these so full. Usually this garden, it's hard, there's two levels of little ponds here, and then it overflows a waterfall. And I think I've seen it overflow the waterfall, I don't know, a couple of times in the 5 years I've been here. I've never seen it so full. And so it was just telling me that lots more water is running off through campus that than used to be. And these storms that I was taking these pictures are not some extraordinary storms. This was not after a hurricane or anything like that. This is after pretty typical, rain. This is the other stormwater management garden that we have. This is our sustainable wetland garden. Can see how full this is. When these basins fill up, it actually runs out over down through a birch grove. It has a designed a purposeful overflow there. And I had never seen it to this point either. And this is regular now. Our rain gardens and our stormwater management gardens fill up regularly now because we do not have the trees soaking up all the water that hits this campus and falls. I mean, we have 19 buildings, and that's a lot of roof space that's sending water straight down, and the trees used to help absorb that, and now they're not doing it. And so I think all of this to say that we need to replace our trees, that we can't plant little flowering trees and shrubs and deal with this issue that's a result of this storm. And our climate, the way it's changing is it's becoming warmer and wetter. So we're going to be dealing with more rain. So we have to consider plants as part of the solution to dealing with the climate change. So the DEP, according to the DEP, our climate is getting warmer and wetter. So it's undergone a long-term warming of more than almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit over the past 110 years, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is when you're talking about, insects that hatch at a certain temperature, and that all the cycles of life of all the species, a lot of them are dependent on temperature or determined by temperature and day length and that kind of thing. And so when you have this amount of change, even 2 degrees doesn't seem like a ton. It does have a lot of effects. It's also become wetter with a 10% increase in the amount of precipitation on average. So just one second. In some places, we had actually a 20% increase in precipitation. Precipitation is expected to increase another 8% by 2050. That's 30 years from now, less than 30 years from now. So that's not that long from now, and 8% is quite a bit considering how much we're already getting. Between 1958 and 2010, the Northeast saw more than a 70% increase in the amount of precipitation falling in very heavy rain events. So our heavy rain events are becoming heavier, right? So we're getting more rain in a shorter amount of time because of these heavy rain events instead of small incidences of rain over a longer period of time. So temperatures in Pennsylvania increased almost by 2 degrees and expected to warm another 6 degrees by 2050. Again, less than 50 or less than 30 years. So 8% more rain and 6 degrees warmer by the time 2050 comes around. And so this is what we're looking at planting, is what can we plant that will be thriving and surviving now, but also with this more rain and warmer weather in 2050. They're saying it used to be that days that were over 95 degrees were rare in this state. And now we don't blink when we have a day over 95 degrees. And they're saying by 2050, we will probably have about 37 days of the year that are over in our region that are over 95 degrees. So this is the warming climate is happening. So with that warming temperature, we get a decrease in air quality. Higher temperatures lead to higher levels of ozone. Warmer, wetter weather leads to more allergens in the air, more mosquitoes, increased infrastructure damage due to floods and landslides because of all the water going into our creeks and streams, which are not not ready for that. They can't handle all of that extra water that comes from all of our developments. Invasive species will actually thrive in this new, I'll talk a little bit more about that, in the new warmer, wetter climates. In our Philadelphia area specifically, sea level is going to be a concern, and people are like, well, it's only a couple inches or something like that. But we have to think also about freshwater inundation as the sea level water rises. Freshwater sources can be threatened by sea level, by the sea. And then of course, precipitation the amount is changing, but also when it's happening is changing. So we'll have an increase in winter and spring precipitation, if the models are correct, and a decrease in summer and fall precipitation. And it feels like that now, right? I mean, we've been talking about, we've gotten a couple of rains, but not nearly enough this summer. Although we may be feeling it extra because we've planted thousands of new plants that all need to be watered now. So we're feeling this lack of water a lot. And of course, heat and hardiness zones will shift. If you're a gardener, you know about hardiness zones, and they're the the limits at which a plant will grow, and determines where you can plant plants. So, we're in zone 7 here. And so, if you have a plant that's hardy zone 5 to 8, you're solidly, this plant is going to do just fine here. But as we warm, the plants that are more adapted to cooler temperatures and cooler regions or higher elevations will not thrive here. And that's concerning, because one of the unique aspects about Pennsylvania and its location in the sort of mid-Atlantic area is that it's the northernmost species for a lot of southern plants, and the southernmost range. It's the northernmost range for a lot of southern plants and the southernmost range for a lot of northern plants. And that gives a tremendous diversity in this state. And as we warm, those northern plants are not going to thrive here. And we're already seeing that evidenced by sugar maples. Sugar maples do not do well here anymore. And you can go online and watch a map of the sugar maple species just moving north and west. So moving up into Canada and over towards Alaska, and where it's colder. And it's actually becoming a problem for the maple syrup industry, because they're just not thriving. The maple forests are in decline because of our warming climate. So we will see this hardiness shift will affect not only the plants that we can plant in our own landscapes, but also the plants that are living in the ecosystems around us, in the forests and the meadows around us. So what do we plant and what do we choose? So here's a former Arboretum staff person and one of our student gardeners who are planting one of the trees that we started installing pretty soon after we got everything cleaned up from the storm. And so some of the decision making that we're doing, of course, relates to the courses that we teach here. So I also teach the woody plant identification for the undergraduate students here. So there's plants that we need to teach them so they know it when they get out into their field in their profession. So climate change may not be the top category of of consideration when we're choosing some of the plants, but for others, where we are choosing what to replant around buildings, or even just what we're going to teach students in the future, we are looking at climate change as one of the decision-making factors for what we're choosing to put in the landscape. So, for our landscapes, there's a couple of things that this means. Oh, I do see a question. I will answer that in a minute. But what it means for our landscapes, our existing landscapes, invasive species will thrive and new ones will move in. So I'm going to ask you in the chat, does anybody know what this picture is of? This flower? You could put it in the chat if you think you know, or if you want to guess what it is. Nobody? No fair Googling it. Well, while I'm waiting another minute to see if anybody wants to put an answer in the chat about what that flower is, somebody asked if the conifer garden was damaged in the storm, and it was not. We lost one tree in there that's already been replaced. It was a small tree. It was one of the most undisturbed of our garden spaces. And the greenhouse next to it fared very well, also only losing about 20 panes of glass in the greenhouse. So that was great. All right, let's see. I have a chat. Yes. All right. So I have sweet pea. I have someone wrote kudzu. Somebody said it's pretty, and I think I've seen it around before. So, right, Kelly, it is kudzu. That is the flower of kudzu. Apparently tastes like grape jelly. can eat the flowers. But a lot of people don't know what the flowers look like, but they do know, the plant that ate the South that was introduced by humans for ornamental reasons, and then was considered as a forage for livestock. So millions of plants were planted by the federal government, and then now it's considered invasive because it has just grown out of control. In 2000, I worked in Wilmington, Delaware, when they first found they confirmed kudzu in Delaware, and that was as far north as they had found it. Now they found it all the way up into Canada. And so this invasive species, as we have a warming climate, this invasive species is going to be more prevalent. It's not going to be killed back by the cold weather, which is what it has been happening. It will thrive, it'll be able to reproduce well, and it will have to start taking a look for it and keeping an eye out for it. I have seen it in multiple places around the region. So something to keep an eye on. So new ones will move in. So we'll have kudzu moving in. I mean, it's already here, but taking hold and becoming more prominent and thriving. Other invasive species might take over. And we're not just talking about plants, we're also talking about insects and diseases. And some insects that are already here that maybe aren't a problem, because winter comes in and kills a large percentage of the eggs, or doesn't allow these insects to overwinter as adults, that kind of thing. As we warm, that could change, and we may be dealing with many more problems than we've had. I mean, there's also the potential for some of this change in our climate to change in the other direction, right? To maybe cure some problems. But you don't hear very much about that. Species like sugar maples, American beech, black cherry, sweet birch, eastern white pine are at risk of decline, and pretty significant decline due to warming or wetter conditions. So while I'm not saying that you shouldn't plant these, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't plant big trees at all, I'm definitely hopefully you've picked up by now that you should be, I believe very firmly that you should be planting big trees, trees that will get big. We have to think about which ones will have the best chance of survival into the future. And while here at the Arboretum, we will plant these trees because we want to teach them, and watching how they do over time is part of research and education that we can do here. These might not be the best options for home landscapes that want to be productive into the future. There's an interesting publication, and I will put, if I can copy this, I can't, I will send it along, but Pennsylvania has actually done a prediction of what the trees will do with the predicted climate change in the future. There's an organization called forestadaptation.org, and you can look in Pennsylvania by region. So we're in the Piedmont region, but you can look at any region and it'll tell you of the native forest trees, which ones are likely to do okay with this predicted change in our climate, and which ones will probably either will decrease or severely decrease over time based on that. And then which ones might actually do better. There's some trees that will thrive more in these warmer, wetter conditions. So that's a really interesting resource. So when you're picking through and trying to decide on your plants, that may be a resource to check into. So what we are looking for is what trees will do well. So I'm focusing on trees, but in general, we want to talk about trends. Oh, Kelly sees kudzu everywhere in Hatboro. Yeah, I always joke around that the Arboretum has every invasive plant. So it's a great place to study invasive plants, and we teach invasive plants here. I do for professionals. I do invasive plant management classes here because we have all of them, but I haven't found kudzu here yet. So I guess we don't have all of them. So the trees, when we're taking into account which ones will do well, we want to look at plants that will tolerate both warmer and wetter conditions if possible. But we also want to look at ones that thrive here right now. So there's definitely plants that we could choose that grow in the southeastern portion of the United States, but that's still too warm for here, right? We're still a zone 7 for now. We still have cold winters. And so some of those plants that do well in the southeastern portion of the United States, even though it's wetter and warmer, may not thrive at this moment. So what we're looking for are plants that thrive at this moment, but then are also likely to thrive as the climate changes. And yes, plants evolve and adapt to climate change over time, but the point is that our climate is changing faster than plants and animals and insects can adapt. And that's the problem. So we have to plant for that. And so this also calls into question what people think of as native plants, right? If our climate is changing so much that it's no longer supporting the native ecosystem, what plants are suitable is going to change. And so this is going to change the whole conversation around native plants, I think. So some of the plants that will do well in both warmer and wetter conditions are hackberry. So hackberry, I don't know if you're familiar with it. It to me is an underused plant. You don't find it for sale in garden centers a lot, unless you go to a specific like native plant place. You don't see hackberry a lot. It's not very ornamental. In fact, it supports a lot of insect life. It's one of the best plants for supporting insect diversity. And for that reason, it often has galls on the leaves. The leaves often look chewed up and horrible, but that just means it's supporting tons of diversity. It is a host plant for hackberry butterfly that without hackberries, that butterfly doesn't exist. It has this fruit that is prized by birds and just supports a ton of wildlife, but it's ugly. And so we don't plant it and we don't ask for it. And that's a problem. Because if we're planting native plants and we're doing that for reasons, the reasons have to be beyond what we think look nice. It's supposed to be to support our systems, to support our wildlife and insects and the whole cycle. And so we have to shift a little bit in our thoughts about native plants and what we're choosing and why. So hackberry is, I think, a great poster child for that, but also hackberry thrives here now. And based on research done by different organizations. So Penn State has done research. There's a lot of places out there that have done research on trees and climate change and predicting, using models to predict how they'll react to these changes. And the models show different severity, right, of change. So there's minimum severity and then the maximum, like worst case scenario severity. And models have been run to see how these trees will do in all of these. And so these seem like they will do well in even the most severe of the predictions. So hackberry is one of them. Sycamore we're all familiar with. Sycamore does get anthracnose now. Leaf fungal disease, which causes it to shed its leaves sort of halfway through the summer, and then it'll leaf out again. But and that may become more of a problem with wetter weather, but it will live in, besides that anthracnose, it would be fine in the warmer, wetter weather. They like wet feet, right? You find them at riparian zones on the edges of large waterways and rivers and creeks and streams and stuff. So they'll be fine. Box elders is another one that people think of as weedy plants. They come with a nice little box elder bug, which is shaped like a rectangle with an X on the back of it. And on warm days in the fall, they'll just assemble en masse on the side of your house. And people get totally grossed out about that. But box elder is a type of maple. And it's predicted that it will do just fine. Again, this is a plant of riparian zones and it seeds in really easily. It's not invasive because it's native, but seeds in really easily, holds stream banks, loves wet feet. And as it gets warmer, this will also do fine. So box elder is a harder sell for me than hackberry, I have to say, as far as including in your landscape, but maybe in restoration areas, we should consider planting box elders more. But I don't know, that one's still tough for me. If anybody has any redeeming qualities that they know about box elder that they'd like to share, let me know. We'll be planting them here in the Arboretum, but if you have a small landscape, that is, I don't know if I would use the space for a box elder. And then eastern redbuds, those are not large trees. So hackberries and sycamores get fairly large and can help with stormwater management as well as providing all those other ecosystem services. Box elder, slightly smaller tree. Eastern redbuds, those are relatively small flowering trees. So though they will do well in those warmer and wetter conditions, they are not necessarily the best for the stormwater management mitigation and actually helping with all that extra water that's going to be around. So does the location of the nursery impact the success of trees, buying trees from a southern nursery? Yes. So if you are looking to buy plants, so if you could source a sugar maple from more southern areas, it may be able to tolerate our warmer conditions better than if you sourced one from northern areas. And so, yeah, so when you're purchasing these trees, the location of the nursery does matter. You want to be sourcing trees now that are from warmer, wetter climates. So southeastern United States is a good place to start to try and source plants. And then for the hard sell on this box elder is because for me, when I think about plants to include in a landscape, that's not a restoration landscape or a natural landscape or woodland or something like that, but like a home garden, I think of seasonal interest and wildlife support and that kind of thing. And box elders don't do a lot of that. They don't have good fall color. They don't have showy flowers. They don't have anything that's really stellar. As far as ornamental wise, as a reason you might include it in your home landscape. Wildlife does eat the samaras. They're a maple, so they get the little helicopters. So wildlife will eat those. They do tend to seed in like crazy. So you'd have a ton of weeds or baby box elders, however you want to look at it, in your yard. So that's why they're a harder sell for me. But I mean, if you love them or if you want to include them, by all means, go for it, for sure. So of course there's plants. If you do have well-drained soil, I think of more sandy soil, not the clayey soil that we tend to have, or even regions or spaces in your yard that have different soils, and you have one area that's pretty well drained, or you want to create a space that's fairly well drained. There are other trees that will do well in the warmer climate, but really need that well-drained soil. So you want to think of that too. So again, more of the southeastern United States conditions, but in well-drained areas. So pin oaks, and actually pin oaks will tolerate a little bit of wet also, but maybe not as much as what we can expect with this future climate. So pin oaks are a great one. Black oaks are a good one, and they're not used a lot. You don't find them a lot for sale in garden centers and nurseries. Pin oaks you find a lot, but black oaks you don't. So I encourage you to check out and look for black oaks. Oaks, of course, are some of the best plants for supporting wildlife also. Not only the acorns for mammals, but the leaves and the flowers for insect life. And and swamp white oaks is another one that I think that we can include in this list that is very tough, very adaptable to all kinds of adverse conditions. Shagbark hickories are another one. We lost both of our big shagbark hickories on this campus, which is very disappointing because it takes forever. This is a shagbark hickory in this picture. It takes forever to get the bark looking so cool. And then this also provides habitat. Moths and bats will overwinter underneath these flaps in the bark. So, and of course the nuts are edible by us and all kinds of other animals. Great fall color. And so, very disappointing, but it's nice to know that they seem like they will thrive based on the models, that they'll thrive and maybe expand their populations as the climate changes. Mockernut hickories as well. Not as interesting bark on those, but equally good ecosystem services. And also these are all great big growing trees, right? These will all help to take up all of that extra water as well. So not only will they thrive in these conditions, their roots will help to take up the extra water, which is something else we're looking for. Other trees that might do well are some other, swamp white oak is the name of the one I said. It's Quercus bicolor. And we're planting quite a few of those here on the campus because they tolerate all kinds of adverse conditions. They don't mind if they're inundated with water for a little while, but they also don't mind if they dry out. They are relatively disease and pest free, and they aren't getting the diseases that our red oak group plants are getting. Our red oaks are in under threat right now from insects and diseases, and not having a very good time. At my house, I had these giant red oaks. They would take, I don't know, 2 or 3 of us to put our arms around them. And in the course of 2 years, they just stone dead, just dead. Every branch dead, just from going from full healthy to dead in 2 years. And that is going on around in the region. These big red oaks are dying. So white oaks and swamp white oaks especially, we're leaning more towards planting so we can figure out how to deal with this red oak thing. So I highly recommend those. Other plants that they think will do well based on these reports and the futures of climate change are black gum. This is another severely, I think, significantly underused plant. If you want to see what they look like, we have some left in our native formal garden here that they make the LA. They look funny now because they lost some branches and things, but if you come in the fall, they're brilliant red. They have these great fruits that are highly prized by birds. When you go in there at the right time of the day, it's a cloud of birds eating all the fruit off of these. They will tolerate wet feet, so they don't mind the extra wet of climate change. And their native range extends down into the southeast, and so they have the potential for tolerating the warmer conditions also. We've started planting a lot more of these as well, with the anticipation that they'll do well. They'll do just fine now. They do just fine now in our gardens, and they will do fine 50 years from now with the predicted climate change as it is right now. And that's all we can base it on. So what we look for when we're choosing these trees is what will do better when it's wetter and warmer, but also, are there trees out there that really tolerate these adverse conditions very well? So, do they handle compaction or times of drought very well? If you can find plants that are really just solid, reliable plants, even in adverse conditions, those are also ones to consider for your landscape. And I feel like black gum is one of those as well. And it's just such a beautiful fall color. It's a great tree. I don't know if any of you have black gum Nyssa sylvatica in your yard, but if you don't, it has little leaves, so it makes nice dappled shade. They're shiny green leaves. I was so excited. I found one I live in the woods, and I found one just growing wild in there. It's very exciting. Another one that I have in my yard is the Eastern hop hornbeam, which not super showy, does get a nice yellow fall color. If you're familiar with musselwood, which has the smooth bark, I make muscle like that, so it has smooth bark and very sinuous trunk. So it looks like ripples of mussels on it. It's called musselwood, or sometimes blue beech. This is similar to that, although the bark is flaky and in rectangles, but and grows a bit larger, but tolerates more adverse conditions than the musselwood does. It's less susceptible to change than musselwood. So Eastern hop hornbeam, also not one that you see a lot for sale or used in landscapes, but definitely one to consider for our changing climate. And if you're going to be replanting plants in your landscape, I would include this one. It has cool fruits, kind of look like hops. If you're familiar with beer, the hops that are used to make beer, that kind of fruit shape, that's the fruit shape on the Eastern hop hornbeam too, which is why it has the name hop hornbeam. And then pines, the shortleaf pine is one that's predicted to do well. As I mentioned, the Eastern white pine is not predicted to do well, which some people wouldn't really care about because they break easily, they're weak wooded, they're fast growing. Some people just don't like them. They're not great landscape trees, they get enormous. And a lot of our evergreens that we're used to using in our landscapes, things like blue spruces and Norway spruces that are very common here, are going to be problematic as we get warmer and wetter. They do not like wet feet, and they don't like the warmer weather. They're from mountainous regions, they're from cooler areas. So if you're looking for conifers and evergreens, shortleaf pine might be one. Cryptomeria would be another one, not native, but will do okay in the warming climate. So you have to be more considerate. I wouldn't do any planting of any hedges of the of conifers, of like Christmas tree type plants, spruces and firs and pines, before you figure out if they're ones that will do well. In fact, there's a book, I lent it to a student. There's a book that is called Conifers of Southeastern US. And that is the book that we're using to guide our conifer selection. Not for the ones that we have to teach now for our students. We have to teach blue spruce, so we planted blue spruces, but we know they're going to die. We know that they're not going to live very long, but we have to teach them, so we're planting them. And we're teaching our students that they're going to be problematic in the future. But for other spaces and other plants, we are choosing plants from that book that are more tolerant of these conditions. But the conifers are going to they're going to struggle a lot, without a doubt. Bald cypress is one we're planting a ton of. Bald cypress and dawn redwoods, we're planting a lot. Those should be just fine in our new climate. So yep, Emily, that is absolutely one that we're doing and should be okay too. And then also there's cultivars available. So there are lots of plants. So a cultivar, that is a word that means cultivated variety, and it's a hybrid. It's a version of a plant that's been created by humans for a specific reason. So it could be disease resistance, it could be a good flower color, it could be great bark, or it could be cold hardiness or heat tolerance. So for example, there's a river birch called Dora Heat that is meant to, your river birches are usually along streams in cooler areas. This river birch, you could plant it. It was designed to be planted in urban areas, in hot spaces, and still do just fine and have this great exfoliating bark. So there are cultivars that are being developed with this new changing climate in mind. So you can look for your favorite plants. You look for a new version of familiar or favorite plants bred for these changing conditions. So they aren't so prevalent right now, but as plant breeders work on, they're working on creating plants for these new climates. So you can keep an eye out for that as well. I don't know yet. I don't think that they've developed like a warm, wet tolerant sugar maple yet. I haven't seen one, but if they do, we'll plant it here. So that's another thing to think about. And then, I mean, basically to sum it up, you want to choose plants that thrive here now, but will also tolerate warmer and wetter conditions, because that is what it's looking like climate change is going to do, is have these warmer, wetter conditions. Not only wetter that the plants will tolerate wet feet, but also that these plants will soak up a lot of that water, right? So it stops or helps to stop the flooding that's happening. And then you can choose cultivars bred for the predicted conditions and for pest and disease resistance, because as we mentioned, the pest and disease pressure is going to increase likely with the warming climate and the wetter climate. So if you can find ones that are bred for pest and disease resistance, that would help you in the long run as well. I was just going to say something else and I just escaped my mind. So I will, if you have any questions about anything, or if you're hoping to get something out of this talk that I didn't mention at all, I'd be happy to answer that for you. And then, oh yes. So best to plant a variety of adaptable trees along a creek bank, or just one or two. So in my opinion, diversity equals resilience. And the more variety of plants you have, the better resistance that landscape has to any one type of damage. So I would always plant a variety of adaptable trees along a creek instead of just one or two. I would pick as many as I could find that are suitable for that space and plant them. That way, if an insect comes in or flooding happens, some are going to be more resistant to damage than others, and you'll always have something there, hopefully. But if you just do one kind and it's susceptible to whatever comes through, then you lose everything. So diversity equals resilience. So plant a bunch of them. My research project, thank you, Emily. So for my doctorate, I am working on, I changed it as a result of this storm happening here at the Arboretum, but I'm working on creating a model to engage the community in adult environmental education post-natural disaster. So what I want to do is create a series of programs here at the Arboretum that address the questions that our community has as a result of this natural disaster. But I need to know from you all what questions you have, what you would like to learn, what the results you would like to have from these programs, and then we'd like to implement them. And so if you want to be a part of contributing to to the creation of these programs, I would love to be able to contact you and include you in the research. We're doing a series of 2 Zoom meetings and 1 in-person meeting coming up next month that you could be a part of. And then there'll be a series of workshops and programs that I'm hoping that I can get a lot of the community to participate in. And this was inspired by people the very next day after the tornado, when we were still just figuring out what in the world we were going to do and what in the world was left and everything. People were calling us to ask us what trees they could replant in their yards. And I thought, this is what we need to do, because we don't want people to just react and just start throwing things in. We want it to be thoughtful and informed choices so that, you know, it helps with this problem, but then also these plants are here for the next generations to come. And it's really easy to just throw some plants in a landscape, but how could we be more thoughtful about it and actually work together as a community to create a resilient ecosystem in the community, but also help with the resilience of our community, right, itself. So that is the goal. So if you're interested, I can get the information for I can get the information, or I can get the information to Erin and she can send it out to you all. And I would be interested in going to any community meetings to talk about this and engage people in this, and also getting this doctorate done. That would be awesome too. I would love to finish this. So thank you for your great questions. I'm happy to answer any more. And please come and visit the Arboretum. We're open all the time, you know, so come and visit and see what we're up to. I'm going to stop sharing now.
All right, thanks, Kathy.
Sure, thank you. I hope it, you know, it's relatively new for us, something to talk about.